Imagine you are 23 years old. You have no savings, no investors, no connections, and no safety net. The year is 1942, and the United States of America has made it abundantly clear, through law, through custom, and through daily humiliation, that someone who looks like you is not supposed to succeed. Banks do not lend to people like you. Corporations do not advertise with publishers like you. Newsstands do not carry magazines for readers like you. And yet, despite every single one of those obstacles, you walk into a room and convince someone to stake you $500. Not because the odds are in your favor, not because the system is designed to help you, but because you have identified something that everyone else has missed. You have seen a market that the entire American business establishment has either overlooked or deliberately ignored. 11 million Black Americans, hungry for stories that reflect their own lives, their own dignity, their own ambitions. That young man was John Harold Johnson, and what he built from that $500 loan would become one of the most remarkable business empires in 20th century American history. At his peak, Johnson Publishing Company generated over $300 million in annual revenue. His flagship magazine, Ebony, reached a monthly readership of nearly 2 million at its height. His second publication, Jet, became so embedded in African American culture that it was referred to simply as the Bible of Black America. He would go on to become the first Black American to appear on the Forbes 400 list of wealthiest Americans. He would sit on the boards of major corporations. He would counsel presidents. He would change the face of American media forever. But none of that was guaranteed. None of it was easy. And almost none of it was supposed to happen at all. Because the story of John H. Johnson does not begin with opportunity. It begins in the cotton fields of Arkansas, in a world that was built to hold him in place. John Harold Johnson was born on January 19, 1918, in the small town of Arkansas City, Arkansas. His mother, Gertrude, was a domestic worker. His father, Leroy Johnson, worked at a sawmill and died in an accident when John was just 8 years old. Arkansas City had no high school for Black students. That single fact captures almost everything you need to understand about the world John Johnson was born into. The infrastructure of opportunity simply did not exist for Black children in the rural American South during that era. Separate and unequal was not just a legal framework. It was an economic trap, designed to ensure that generational poverty remained exactly that, generational. Gertrude Johnson refused to accept that fate for her son. She remarried a man named James Thompson, and in 1933, when John was 15 years old, she made the decision to move the family to Chicago. She had heard about the Great Migration, about the possibility that the industrial cities of the North offered something the South never would. She was right, but the reality of Chicago was also complicated. The city was segregated in practice, if not always in law. Black families were pushed into specific neighborhoods. Opportunities were limited. But compared to Arkansas City, Chicago was a revelation. John enrolled at DuSable High School on the south side of Chicago, and something changed in him almost immediately. He became editor of the school newspaper. He joined the student council. He graduated as the class leader. He was not just surviving, he was excelling. And one particular moment during this period would alter the entire course of his life. In 1936, a local businessman named Harry Pace heard Johnson speak at a school event and was so impressed that he offered the young man a part-time job at his insurance company, Supreme Life Insurance. For a Black teenager in Depression-era Chicago, this was extraordinary. Johnson took the job, eventually worked his way to a full-time position, and was tasked with reading newspapers and magazines to compile a digest of articles for Pace. It was in this role that Johnson had his defining insight. He was reading hundreds of publications every month, and almost none of them contained stories about Black Americans unless those stories involved crime or tragedy. The humanity, the achievement, the culture of Black America was effectively invisible in mainstream media, and the Black community had no major national publication of its own. Johnson started thinking. There was already a model for what he wanted to do. Reader's Digest, launched in 1922, had built a massive readership by reprinting condensed versions of articles from other publications. What if he created the same concept, but focused entirely on stories about and for Black Americans? What if he gathered the best journalism about Black life from various newspapers and presented it in a single, accessible, affordable magazine. The idea was simple. The execution was anything but. Johnson needed money to print the first issue. He calculated that he needed $500. He went to a bank. The bank said no. He went to another bank. Another no. He then did something that required remarkable audacity. He went to his mother and asked if she would let him use her furniture as collateral for a loan. His mother, a woman who had already sacrificed so much to get him to Chicago, agreed. He used that collateral to secure $500 from a finance company. The year was 1942. He was 24 years old. With that loan, he printed 20,000 copies of the first issue of Negro Digest. He had no distribution deal, no retail partnerships, no marketing budget. So he created his own distribution network by asking friends to go into stores and request the magazine, manufacturing the appearance of demand until it became real demand. Within months, Negro Digest was selling 50,000 copies per month. Within a year, it hit 100,000. The hustle had worked. But Johnson was already thinking bigger. In November 1945, Johnson launched Ebony magazine. The concept was bolder and more ambitious than Negro Digest. Rather than reprinting other people's work, Ebony would create original content. It would celebrate Black achievement, Black culture, Black beauty, and Black aspiration in a way that had never been done at scale. Johnson looked at Life magazine, the wildly successful photojournalism publication that had captured white American life in vivid, glossy pictures, and he said, "We deserve that too." Ebony would be Life magazine for Black America. The response was staggering. The first issue sold 25,000 copies. Within months, it had sold over 500,000 per issue. Readers were not just buying a magazine, they were buying a mirror. For the first time in American publishing history, they were seeing themselves depicted with dignity, with glamour, with power. But Johnson was smart enough to know that circulation alone did not build a media company. Revenue came from advertising. And here he ran directly into the wall of American corporate racism. Major advertisers refused to place ads in Ebony. Their reasoning, when they gave it at all, was that Black consumers did not have purchasing power. Johnson knew this was wrong. He had the data, he had the circulation numbers, he had the letters from readers. He went to corporations with a pitch that was essentially a business education. He showed them that Black Americans collectively represented billions of dollars in annual purchasing power. He argued that companies ignoring this market were leaving money on the table. Eventually, companies like Zenith, Chesterfield, and Supreme Liberty Life began advertising with him. Each new advertising partner made it easier to bring in the next one. Then, in 1951, came Jet magazine, a small, pocket-sized weekly digest that delivered Black news in a fast, consumable format. Where Ebony was a celebration, Jet was an essential service. It covered politics, entertainment, crime, civil rights, and community life with an intimacy and urgency that resonated deeply. At its peak, Jet would sell nearly 1 million copies per week. Together, Ebony and Jet gave Johnson Publishing Company a media reach that was almost unparalleled in Black America. The cultural weight of these publications during the Civil Rights era cannot be overstated. In September 1955, when 14-year-old Emmett Till was brutally murdered in Mississippi, it was Jet magazine that published the photograph of his open casket, a photograph that his mother, Mamie Till, insisted the world needed to see. That image, published in a mainstream white press that largely looked away, galvanized the civil rights movement in ways that speeches and marches alone had not. John Johnson did not set out to be an activist, but the platform he built became one of the most powerful tools of social transformation in American history. Throughout the late 1950s and 60s, as the civil rights movement intensified, Johnson Publishing was there at every major turning point. Johnson himself grew closer to political power. He organized trade missions with President Kennedy. He was appointed a Goodwill Ambassador under President Nixon. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996. His publications were not just entertainment, they were documentation. They were evidence that Black America existed, thrived, struggled, and demanded to be counted. Financially, Johnson was building something extraordinary. By the 1970s, Johnson Publishing had expanded well beyond magazines. The company launched Fashion Fair Cosmetics in 1973, a beauty line specifically designed for women with deeper skin tones, because Johnson had observed that no major cosmetics brand served the black consumer market adequately. Fashion Fair eventually became the largest black-owned cosmetics company in the world, sold in department stores across America. The company also produced television shows, books, and eventually owned a building in Chicago that became the most prominent black-owned office tower in the city. At his financial peak, Johnson's net worth was estimated at around $600 million. But stories like this rarely end without hardship. The same industry disruption that humbled every print media giant in America eventually came for Johnson Publishing too. The rise of cable television in the 1980s fractured media audiences. The internet in the 1990s accelerated that fragmentation. Advertising revenue for print publications was in structural decline. Ebony and Jet, which had once seemed invincible, were losing readers and advertisers to digital platforms that operated at a scale and speed that magazines simply could not match. John H. Johnson died on August 8, 2005, at the age of 87. He left behind a company, a legacy, and a question about whether that legacy could survive in a world that had changed beyond recognition. His daughter, Linda Johnson Rice, took over leadership and fought hard to preserve what her father had built. In 2016, Jet ceased its print edition entirely. Ebony followed with its own struggles, changing ownership multiple times and navigating bankruptcy proceedings. The physical empire had contracted, but the cultural influence remained impossible to erase. Here is what every person watching this should take from John H. Johnson's story. He did not succeed because he had advantages. He succeeded because he understood something fundamental about value and about markets. He looked at 11 million people who were being ignored by every major institution in America and recognized that being ignored is not the same as being irrelevant. He recognized that when the market fails to serve a group of people, that is not a sign that those people lack value. It is a signal that an enormous opportunity exists for whoever is willing to show up. He also understood that perception is a business tool. By manufacturing demand for his first magazine, before that demand was fully organic, he created the conditions for real demand to emerge. By presenting advertiser data in terms of lost revenue, rather than social obligation, he made it rational for corporations to partner with him. He did not wait for the world to become fair. He studied the world as it was and figured out how to build something extraordinary inside of it. There is a version of John Johnson's story that exists only as a footnote in American business history. A curious anecdote about a magazine from another era, but that would be a profound disservice. What Johnson actually did was prove that the most underestimated markets in the world are not the ones with no value. They are the ones that power has chosen not to see. And the entrepreneurs who learn to see what power ignores, those are the ones who change everything. 500 borrowed dollars, 300 million in annual revenue. A generation of readers who finally saw themselves reflected with dignity. That is not just a business story. That is a lesson about what becomes possible when one person refuses to accept the world's verdict on their worth. The furniture that Johnson's mother pledged as collateral for that original loan. Think about that image. A mother betting everything she owned on the belief that her son could do something that had never been done. She was right, and the world has never quite been the same.